Hi everyone, thank you for joining my webinar today. My name is Haley Jacobs. I am a master's student and dietetic intern at Benedictine University. In today's webinar, we are going to cover the low carbohydrate diet. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, there's going to be a chance at the end to ask any questions. So in today's webinar, we are going to cover the prevalence of obesity throughout the world and how it has influenced the amount of people following the carbohydrate diet. We will look into what the low carbohydrate diet is, as well as the perceived benefits that come from following that low carb diet. And then we will go into look at what the research is finding based on those claims. What you are shown here is a graph that represents the prevalence of obesity throughout the world. In 2016, it was estimated that worldwide more than 1.9 billion adults were overweight, and of these 1.9 billion, 650 million were obese. Now, the chart that you're looking at was obtained by Medical Press, and their numbers state that upwards of 5.5 billion individuals are overweight, and 39 to 49% of that overweight population actually fall under the obese category. So, when looking at this chart, you can see that the overweight population makes upwards of 76% of the global population, whereas underweight individuals only make up about 10%, and normal weight individuals make up from 14 to 28%. So, with this increase in prevalence of obesity, the number of Americans dieting is also increasing. As of 2018, 36% of Americans reported following a specific diet, and of those 36%, 5% were following the low carbohydrate diet. So, what is the low carbohydrate diet? Well, before I go into what exactly that diet is, I wanted to remind everyone what my plate looks like for those following a typical diet. When looking at this plate, you can see that half the plate should be made up of fruits and vegetables, while the other half is made up of grains and protein. Typically, when looking at a general diet, the composition of one's daily intake is around 45 to 55% carbohydrates, 20 to 35% fat, and 10 to 35% protein. However, for someone who is following a low carb diet, their plate looks a little different. Now, this is a typical plate you might see of someone who is following the low carb diet. As you can see, their carb to protein and fat ratio is significantly reduced. An individual following the low carb diet will aim to consume anywhere between 5 to 45% of their calories from carbohydrates. Whereas, like I just stated before, that a general diet is made up of 45 to 55% carbohydrates. So, with this decrease in carbohydrate intake, the individual will then replace those carbs by increasing their fat and protein intake. Now, while the amount of carbohydrates consumed plays a very large part in the low carbohydrate diet, another factor is the type of carbohydrates consumed. The two types of carbohydrates there are simple and complex. And on the next slide, we will go into more in-depth information of examples of what foods fall under each category. So here we can see what carbohydrate sources fall under simple and complex. So just to give a bit of a background, simple carbohydrates are quickly absorbed by the body and provide the body with quick energy, which can be either naturally occurring in foods or they can be commercially made. Now, examples of naturally occurring simple carbohydrates include fruits, vegetables, and milk, whereas examples of commercially made simple sugars include syrups, sweets, and artificial sweeteners. Now, someone following a low carbohydrate diet is going to try to limit their simple carbohydrates just because they're only going to give them a boost of energy for a short period of time. Where if we look at the complex carbs take longer for the body to digest, which in turn makes the body feel fuller longer. So some examples of ideal complex carbohydrates include whole grains, potatoes, and vegetables. However, complex carbohydrates can also be very highly refined and less ideal for individuals to consume. Examples of these carbohydrates are white bread, white grains, most pastries, and desserts. And again, someone following the low carbohydrate diet will want to refrain from these and get more whole grain, potato, vegetables into their diet rather than highly refined or any artificial sweeteners, sugars, or syrups. So, what effect does the low carbohydrate diet have on weight loss? So, when individuals consume carbohydrates, the amount of sugar in their blood rises. And as stated previously, simple carbohydrates will cause an immediate spike in blood sugar levels, whereas complex carbs digest more slowly and have less of effect on the amount of sugar in the blood. When this blood sugar increases, it triggers the body to release insulin. And insulin is what helps the body absorb blood glucose or sugar into the body cells. When the body absorbs this form of sugar, our bodies are then able to use this energy to fuel our daily activities. So, this insulin can be stored in different areas throughout the body. So when we consume more than what is needed for energy, our bodies are going to store that extra sugar in our muscles, our liver, other cells that can use the energy for the future, or it is then converted into fat. So the thought behind the low carbohydrate diet is that by decreasing the carbohydrate intake, it will then lower insulin levels, which in turn will help the body absorb helps the body absorb the sugar into the body cells. This decrease in insulin is then what is thought to cause the body to burn stored fat and energy to fuel our daily activities rather than using the sugar, which then would lead to weight loss. So now that we have a basic understanding of what the low carbohydrate diet is, let's look into what researchers are finding and what they have to say about the diet. So, researchers are finding that those who follow a low carbohydrate diet experience greater weight loss compared to those on a low fat or calorie restricted diet. One of these studies conducted research on adolescents who were around 15 years old. Their results found that children placed on a low carbohydrate diet for 12 weeks lost anywhere from 1.4 to 42 pounds, while adolescents placed on a low fat diet for 12 weeks lost 0 to 19.8 pounds. So, as you can see looking at this graph, how much of a difference there is between the weight loss of the low carbohydrate diet compared to the low fat diet. And these results were similar throughout other research studies as well. A similar study conducted research on adults, and they found that at the end of a 6-month study, adults placed on a low carbohydrate diet lost more weight compared to adults placed on a low fat diet. Another benefit besides weight loss found from following a low carbohydrate diet is improved blood glucose levels. So, like stated before, it is thought that following a low carb diet will decrease insulin levels, affecting the amount of glucose or sugar in the blood. And a study found that the daily blood glucose levels of a newly diagnosed diabetes patient had remarkably decreased levels when following a low carb diet compared to when they were following a restricted diet. So, what's the catch? Well, we see that the benefit of this diet is short term. Researchers are suggesting that it is unclear how effective this diet remains after an extended period of time. There was one study that found that their participants who were placed on the low carbohydrate diet lost more weight than the calorie restricted group at the 3 and 6 month follow up. However, at the 12-month follow up, the difference in weight loss between the groups was not significant. Now, with this being said, not everyone following the low carbohydrate diet will experience the same results found by these research studies, but we see that it's pretty common that individuals will experience an initial weight loss, and it seems to be unclear as to how long this weight loss will continue. Another concern about the low carbohydrate diet is that once one stops following this diet and begins to reintroduce carbohydrates, that they will regain the weight that they lost. This is because If they become too restricted, the body may hold on to any calories it needs as soon as you start reintroducing those carbohydrates, which in turn can lead to the weight gain. So, by introducing ideal complex carbohydrates like the whole grains and vegetables slowly back into the diet, it may help minimize the effect of discontinuing this diet. It is also very important to note that a low carbohydrate diet should always be done under the supervision of a doctor. While following a low carbohydrate diet can be beneficial for some, it is uncertain how this diet will affect everyone, and to be safe, a doctor should be consulted. And it's also important to mention that while individuals diagnosed with diabetes have had positive results following a low carbohydrate diet, a doctor should be there to monitor their diet and blood glucose levels closely with them. So, what I think is important to take away from this webinar is that following a low carbohydrate diet may be the answer for some individuals who are looking to kickstart their weight loss. However, in the long term, the diet may not provide consistent results and may lose its effectiveness over time. So, from what research has discovered, is that there's no hazardous effects that are known to come from following this diet. But as always, it's recommended that it should be done under the supervision of a doctor, especially if you have other health diagnoses such as type 2 diabetes. So I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar. I hope you found it interesting and were able to learn a few things along the way. Like I said at the beginning, please let me know if you have any questions that you may have, and I will be sure to get back to you. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.